now start having an impact on the data protection. We've had these instances where somebody, those lending apps, some of them will require that you provide access to your contact list. And a few of us have received calls from these online lenders calling you, telling you so and so borrowed money, they have not repaid, and their reputation will be hurt. And when this happens, we are likely to see some of these young people getting into mental problems, which is now another problem that will be multiplied by this. So I don't know whether to support this or not to support it, but the negatives of this move are greater than maybe the positives. The only positives I see is the fact that government will probably raise more money from non-resident lenders in the online platform, but the negative impacts of the same might be more than the positives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, Diana, I'd like to bring you back on board. Looking at the high rate of defaulting, especially with the introduced Hustler Fund, they've also said that they're trying to figure out a way of getting the young people who had tried to get monies to refund. So in your opinion, do you think that the short-term credit will become unaffordable, or is there a different way we can approach this?
Thank you, Lynette. There's something Alex mentioned, and before Ipote, platforms like the online platforms that we have online, like Tala, Branch, and the likes, they're actually a go-to for emergency cash for most small businesses in the informal sector. And what this proposal will do in the event that they impose excess duty to the non-residential or online digital lenders, what that basically means is it is targeting a specific, not specific, but when you look at the high percentage of users of online lenders, it is common mwananchi. And this proposal risks criminalizing survival strategies for most young people and low-income households. So this imposition of excess duty definitely means the interest rates will go up, and then when it comes to now repaying, of course, it will be difficult, and the number of defaulters will go higher and higher, similar thing to the Hustler Fund. But if the finance bill wants to impose this excess duty, the whole impact that it has, and I think I'll just emphasize on this, is that then borrowing will become more expensive, be it short-term or long-term. Especially when you think of short-term, the lifeline starts to vanish and it becomes even more unaffordable. Think of now what is happening. I'll give an example of what is happening with the university funding. When help delays to release its funds, and within that time you are blocked from sitting for an exam, the most likely app you're going to run for a quick loan will be the online apps for a short-term period. So the rights, that basic rights that we have in the Constitution. So I feel like this whole thing of imposing excess duties on the lenders, it's not about protecting local lenders. It's about pushing basically the poor out of credit systems without creating any alternative, unless the government tells us that they have one. Because as it is, it feels like this is not an inclusive form of tax proposal. It's not a reform. It's more of an exclusion, trying to cut off a specific group of population from benefiting from the credit systems that we have. And that is, like what Alex has said, that is why now there'll be more likelihood of more people ending up on the CRB list. So I think, in my opinion, this is not a proposal we wish that for the finance bill to pass. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Diana. I'd like to pose a question to our listeners, and I don't know if one of us can just request, and then TI will allow you to speak. And the question would be, is there a time where you needed to borrow money on short notice? Number one, what was the experience like? And then number two, how did the repayment terms affect your life afterwards? So I don't know if we can get one listener to just engage with us on that conversation, and then see I can bring them up. Okay, on my end, I'm not seeing any requests, so I'll take that as we proceed. In case of anything, I'll just see it on the chat box. But just that's a question that we can think about as we continue on with the conversation. Now, I'd like to bring back Cornelius, and I'd like to speak on the payee reform. Is it a win for workers? And the first question that I'd like to pose it to you is, employers are now mandated to apply tax relief at payroll level. Is this long overdue or too little? Or should it be imposed? Like, should it be passed in the finance bill?
I think this generally a welcome idea because of disclosures. Because most of the time, employers conceal this kind of information from employees, and therefore it's a disadvantage. To the extent that this disclosure and computation will enable the employee the right to access and also to be able to see how much of the payroll now is available in terms of disposable income is very important. We know for the last 2 years, the payroll has really been raided through the housing levy, the increased allocation for NSSF, and even the SHIF. And this has really meant that the purchasing power of the ordinary employee has really significantly reduced. So we have pay on paper, but in terms of what you ultimately get that you can spend has significantly reduced. So this initiative is likely to promote accountability and transparency in this area, and it might benefit the employee ultimately in terms of what actually they take home as disposable income.
Thank you. And just speaking on the pay, I'd like Alexander to come through. And my question would be, looking at that, employees will have full disclosure of their tax reliefs at the payroll level. Do you think that employers are ready to comply? And do you think that there's enough systems to put this condition in place?
Thank you. I think, in my view, the employers have no challenge complying. The challenge has actually been on the KRA side. If we look at the system we used for filing our taxes, when it comes to some reliefs such as personal relief, insurance relief, mortgage, and interest relief, disability relief, and so on, you will not find them in the matrix that we normally use from the iTax system. So what needs to be done is once this particular piece of legislation goes through, then it is up to the rest of us to ensure that KRA implements this through the iTax system. Once that is implemented, then it will be easy for anybody who is filing their returns to ensure that all the reliefs that are due to a given individual are rendered to them. To give you an example, in the past we've had, and many of us have had challenges filing for our tax returns because you will find that there is normally a restriction in the amount of money you can add on the personal relief. At times the number is somewhere around 28,000, and for those who have a pay that is that attracts a higher personal relief than that, you are restricted from adding a number that is higher than that from that system. Now, what this particular amendment is doing, it's going to ensure that KRA allows for those tax reliefs to be computed within your payroll, and therefore if the challenge is on the KRA side, then the employer might have difficulties in doing that. But in this case, once this is implemented, then it will be easy for employees to benefit from all their tax reliefs. And this, at the end of the day, to support what Cornelius has said, it will mean that what you get as your disposable income will be higher. Ordinarily, what tax reliefs do, it means there is some money that is refunded to you due to a tax relief that is owed to you. If you may recall, those of us who are around during the COVID time, when we had a reduction of the income tax rates, the tax relief went up. And when it went up, it meant that our disposable income was higher. And that is what is supposed to happen in this case, where your disposable income goes higher when it is possible for you to compute all your tax reliefs. So in my view, to respond to your question, I think the employers have no problem with this, as long as the systems within KRA are worked on to ensure that then the employers, as they file their returns, this will be made easy and possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alex. And you've introduced an aspect on the iTax and the systems in KRA. We've had a lot of times Kenyans complaining of the systems of KRA. So just to bring us home, Diana, and I'd like to pose this question to you. Do you feel like this pay reform will be an end to refund bureaucracy, and will this improve the take-home pay?
Thank you, Lynette. The answer to that is yes. Why? Because at the end of the day, it will benefit all employees from tax relief, and it is also, in my opinion, in proposing that employers directly apply tax relief at a payroll level, I feel like that is a good proposal, because it means workers will feel the benefit of immediately from their pay slip, unlike now how things are. And of course, it will have a more transparent effect. And I think most of the things that I was to highlight have already been highlighted by my fellow speakers, but I think at the end of the day, it is a potential good move, yes, but only if it is implemented effectively after the same has been adopted in the finance bill.
All right, thank you, Diana. I'd like to still stick with you, and we are looking at the second part that we will be discussing is on tax surveillance and constitutional red flags. So there is a proposed deletion of a clause that protects businesses from KRA integration. And my question to you would be, what are some of the potential risks to privacy and economic freedom if the clause protecting businesses from automatic KRA system integration is deleted? And how might this affect small and medium enterprises differently from large corporations? Diana?
Yes, sorry. Yeah, I realized I was talking while muted. That's a good question. So currently the bill proposes deleting protections that are currently preventing KRA from accessing our data without consent or obtaining any court order. So basically what this proposal means, it opens the door for KRA to monitor our mobile money and bank transactions. It will also open a door for real-time tracking of our income and spending, noting that most of the people normally gets, or rather transact via M-Pesa, and if KRA is able to monitor how much you're making via M-Pesa and not what is reflected in the bank account, that raises a risk of breaching data protection provisions. And it also has a potential of misuse of the sensitive information that you'll get. Of course, this proposal on its own goes against the Data Protection Act, which we have in place, and it is supposed to protect one's privacy in terms of the sensitive information that one holds. So if a government, if the government has, no, let me not use that example, because I feel like I will be stepping on some people's toes. But essentially, with this proposal, it feels like they are not respecting the privacy rights that we uphold as per the Article 31 of the Constitution. Of course, that raises a whole red flag, because then, as a constitution, the Constitution is basically our Bible, and imposing a proposal that will go against provision under the Constitution, it just means they don't care at all. Because what is the intention of deleting this proposed protection of having KRA access our data without any consent or court order? What is the intention that they have in mind? There is no justification given for that. I don't see how it prevents, or rather it enhances revenue collection, because there are many other ways in which KRA can collect revenue without necessarily peeping into our M-Pesa accounts or bank accounts without us knowing. So this proposal cannot, of course, come at the expense of our civil liberty. Efficiency has to be balanced with accountability and transparency. And if unchecked, we risk creating a surveillance state under the guise of tax collection or revenue collection, and it's a dangerous move. And I feel like this is something that cannot hold at the end of the day, considering that it has already even disregarded the constitutional provisions on our right to privacy. So of course, it's a proposal which I think should not even see the light of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to bring Cornelius on board. Speaking onto Diana's sentiments on the privacy and abuse of power, looking at this particular clause, what are some of the risks to personal privacy and the potential for abuse of power if government agencies can access our financial data in real time without judicial oversight?
This is very strange proposal, because our national tax policy, one of the objectives is that we need to align with global best practices. To the extent that this administrative measure is being proposed to promote efficiency, tax collection efficiency, it must not infringe on individual rights in terms of privacy, personal data privacy. So there must be a balance between the need to efficiently collect tax and also to ensure that it's done within the globally accepted standards, which I think in this particular case is a very thin line. And we need to interrogate this and possibly challenge it in a court of law, because then this is going to really have far much or far implications on our privacy and data, especially of financial nature. And sometimes we don't know who gets to access this kind of information.
Thank you, Cornelius. And looking at the tax area, this will go back to KRA. And Alexander, I'd like to pose this question to you. do we feel like this will make KRA more efficient, or is it just more of a feared angle? So looking at this, granting KRA with real-time access to financial data to strengthen, do you think that they will be strengthening tax compliance, through efficiency, or does it risk turning the tax authority into a surveillance tool that erodes public trust, which already is there?
That's a good question. I just wanted to take us back to a bit to the genesis of this problem. During the tax amendment laws that went to Parliament in December last year, the Tax Procedures Act was amended by introducing a section 55A, and this particular section was giving certain powers to KRA to access some information. Parliament, in its own wisdom on the floor of the House, added subsection 1B, which then protects all of us citizens from that direct access by KRA. And this was in consideration of the rights to privacy that we have under Article 31, and also the Data Protection Act of 2019, as has been mentioned. However, what we are seeing in the current finance bill is a reversing of what Parliament did during the tax laws amendment process last year in December. And in my view, this does not make KRA any efficient, but it only makes it only exposes Kenyans to very serious risks of exposure of their private data. You can imagine what would happen if somebody has access to all your financial information and they are scrupulous working for KRA or any other body for that matter. This would expose yourself to very serious security threats, while in our view, KRA has enough information through the PIN number that they have. So therefore, they don't need to access all our other information without a court order when it is necessary. And if it is necessary, then the court will provide enough protection to yourself to ensure that the provisions of Article 31 and the Data Protection Act of 2019 are not violated. So in our view, this is one of those clauses that we are vehemently going to reject. And in our subsequent, even in our submission that we have made to the Finance and Planning Committee, we have said as much. And when we get the opportunity to make our oral presentations, we will still reject this particular proposal. I understand on Saturday when the Commissioner General appeared before the Finance and Planning Committee, this one came up. And I think if there is one clause that we will even have the support of the committee, is this particular one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alex. And I'd just like to quickly shift so that I'll open this Twitter space for our listeners to ask questions to our panelists. And I want us to look on the aspect of the public trust, the participation, and the protest legacy. And I'd like to pose this question to Diana. And this bill, it has promised to alleviate the cost of living and restore public trust. Remember, this is, again, 1 year post the finance bill that we rejected, and they tried to make sure that there are some loopholes that they've tried to seal it. In your own opinion, do you think this is happening, or is just another mechanism to just pat us at the back?
Judging from the conversations we've had earlier as we started, the bill promises to alleviate cost of living, but when you look at the proposals being made, some of them aim to actually make things even harder. And how are they going to restore public trust by that? I feel like the finance bill currently is somewhat, the language is somewhat softer, but structurally I feel like the same regressive trend still persists. restoring public trust does not just come by mere mention or by mere mention of it. It comes from listening and including every person in the conversation, the decision-making process, and responsiveness from the government. That is how we are able to restore public trust. Now, as today was the deadline of submitting all the written memoranda on the finance bill. I believe the oral submissions are still ongoing, but what will be of key importance for us is to ensure that the government is listening to us. They have involved all parties from all different areas in life, including youth, women, PWDs, and others, and they need to be responsive to that. So let's not forget about last year, like you've mentioned. That was not just about a bad bill. It was about reclaiming dignity and demanding representation and being heard. And this protest movement really sparked a new consciousness. But of course, we cannot be doing that every financial or every year whenever they have a finance bill proposed in place. So they need to ensure that if they really intend to restore public trust and they intend for the bill to elevate our cost of living, then they need to have or they need to undertake a very meaningful public participation. As I said, of course, we will assess that performance by seeing if they were able to listen to the written submissions we made, the oral submissions that we will subsequently make. Will they ignore it or will they consider it? So it is something that we will see if at the end of the day it will lead to restoring public trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. And just looking at this bill, and I'd like to pose this question to Cordelius. This bill is more than just numbers. It's a reflection of how government priorities are shaped, often with limited public participation, which is very true on the ground. While the Constitution guarantees us the right to be heard in legislative processes, many Kenyans feel excluded or ignored. Public participation often feels more performative, feels rushed or inaccessible to ordinary citizens. And this was felt during the impeachment of the former deputy president, the way they rushed the whole public participation game for his impeachment. Now, looking at that brief statement given by our fellow panelist, Diana, what are some of the mechanisms that exist for public input? Is Parliament listening or not?
Thank you. I think one of the cardinal principles of public participation is that there should be demonstrated probability that the input that the public gives finds its way in the final decision-making process. If you look at what happened last financial year, it's a demonstration that the public participation was just done to tick the box or to meet the legal requirement, but there was any desire from government or parliament to be specific to really change anything in terms of the proposals that were there. This year, I think the government has a bit clever with the finance bill. It has not been openly shared and discussed as last year. If anything, what has been put in the forefront is the budget. But the question on how that budget is going to be financed has taken 2 steps probably back if you compare to what was there last year. Last year, finance bill was discussed more than even the budget itself. This time around, I think the government is more willing to show us how they want to spend the money as opposed to how the money is going to be generated. And this has been very deliberate because of the experience of last year. So I think beyond Parliament, there are other mechanisms through which we should be able to consolidate our ideas and share through the various agencies that have been mandated to also help in shaping our national tax policy. even participation through. See that this finance bill is just one of the many other, is one of the stages through which we can seek to input in how we want to generate income or generate revenue for financing public service. But the bigger discussion will even be taking place within the medium expenditure framework when we discuss about the medium-term revenue strategy for both counties and national government. So the spaces is wide, but only it's clearly manifested at the time when we are discussing the finance bill. But it should be a full cycle discussion, even beyond this particular stage. But more importantly is that the discussion around revenue raising should be informed by the budget estimate itself. If you look at the previous way of doing things, the finance bill used to come 90 days after the passing of the budget estimate to allow for now thinking about how we are going to raise revenue to implement the approved budget. But now they are being done concurrently. So it means the question of involving people on revenue raising will start early from the days of budget making so that we don't create a huge budget that poses a significant challenge in terms of our capacity to finance it. And people should be able, or the public should be able to participate at all stages so that the finance bill is also in conformity with other public finance policy documents.
Thank you. Thank you, Cornelius. We've actually set the pace for Alex's question. And just looking at how the Kenyan Constitution envisions public participation and accountability. Now, Alexander, this question I'd like for you to extensively just give us a review. Looking at how the Constitution envisions participation and accountability in budgeting, not just after the decisions are made, but during the formulation of the priorities. Yet, the finance bill process often feels a top-to-down, technical and rushed, with little room for citizens to influence how the resources are raised or spent. This raises a deeper question. And now to my question to you is this a missed opportunity for participatory budgeting?
A very good question there. When you talk about participatory budgeting, let me just give you a background information about this one. Participatory budgeting started in Brazil in the 80s. And what participatory budgeting does, it gives an opportunity for citizens to make certain decisions on projects that will be funded in the budget. And we all know that there are some technical parts of the budget that have to be left to the technocrats. For instance, how do we fund debt repayment? How do we fund salaries and the like? But when it comes to development expenditure, what participatory budgeting was invented to do, it was supposed to give room to the citizens to decide on a portion of the budget what will go into, which projects will go into that in that particular budget. And here in Kenya, in my earlier life, we tried implementing this with certain counties and a World Bank project called the Kenya Accountable Devolution Project, where we went to counties and would request the county governments to set aside some amount of money that citizens would decide what will be done with that amount of money. The projects would be raised, the normal way of how you do participatory budgeting, you would have projects raised in a particular village. Then the villagers would meet at a certain venue and decide among the many projects that came up, which one are they fronting to proceed to the ward level. At the ward level, they would send two representatives who would go again and present this project at the ward level. Once it's presented there among the many other projects that will come from different villages, they would then pick on a few that they would then proceed with to the sub-county level. At that point, at the ward level, they would again elect 2 or 3 representatives who would go to the sub-county level and front those projects. all the way to some projects that would make their way all the way to the county level. Now, at that level, then you would find that a project that originated from the village gets funding in the budget. So, in my view, looking at our Constitution 2010, when you look at Article 201, it does anticipate a situation where the public would be involved to this extent. But looking at how we do our public participation, it is more of a ticking the box exercise and not participatory budgeting as it were. And I hope maybe Treasury and the government would pick these up and even allow citizens to contribute to some of the projects that are funded. I think last year, but one Treasury tried to go around the counties and speak to citizens, asking them what would they want to see in the budget. But these meetings were held at the county headquarters. So of course, you would imagine if the county commissioner is the one who has mobilized, he would mobilize people who are not from very far off the county headquarters, and that would not be very representative of the community in a county. So this is something that should be adopted, and probably Treasury can do this once every other 3 years, because we normally prepare a medium-term budget that covers the current year and 2 outer years, and this is something that is doable once every year. Looking at the example that was given, if we had the time to go around the country and conduct public participation when we were impeaching the deputy president, and recently when we had public participation exercises on the NGCDF amendment bill, constitutional amendment bill, it should be possible to dedicate some resources once, at the very least, once every 3 years, where we get to hear from the citizens themselves, and we have projects emanating from the citizens going all the way and finding themselves in the national budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexander. Now, I'm about to open the floor to our listeners for questions to either our panelists. Now, before we get to that, and just to lay the foundation of the questions that our listeners would ask, come June 2025, we will be looking at 1 year post the anti-finance bill protest. Many CSOs, activists, and ordinary citizens, we all came together to raise our voices on issues of governance, transparency, and economic justice. The energy and the numbers were encouraging, but the real measure of success lies in whether our efforts influenced policy, they shifted public discourse, or changed government behavior. Reflecting on this past mobilization, it helps us to understand the power and the limits of civic engagement in Kenya today. Looking at how many lives were lost, how many of our fellow comrades, they're not able to be traced ever since June 24th. And do we feel like our voices mattered, considering the way the shift has been in the country? Did the movement, the Gen Z movement, did it change anything? And I'd like to start with Diana and then go to Alexander and then Cornelius to just share your reflections. Just 1 year post 2024-2025 anti-finance bill protest. Now we're going to the same year, and we are seeing different sections of the bill that do not sit well with us. Did the movement change anything at all, or are we still going back to the streets again?
That's a good question, Lynette. I think my answer would be yes. Our voices were did matter last year. The movement absolutely changed things. Maybe not all the way or in all the ways that we hoped, but to be honest, I think last year was a turning point because I witnessed one of the civic mobilizations in the countries in this country's history, apart from the 1980s. But I think this one was fueled by the fact that the mobilization was done via social media. There was an unknown leader. It was a whole movement. You could not pinpoint onto who was driving the movement. And it was not just about the size of the protest. It was the clarity of the message. Like we were just saying, this is not what we want, and for once, I think this forced the parliament to retreat and rework on the finance bill 2024, which was later on withdrawn. So I think yes, the movement worked, but now looking at the current finance bill, I feel like the burden is still regressive. The process is still top down, and this movement definitely has opened the door, because last year we all witnessed how it shook the system, but now it's time for us to push for an even deeper institutional change, push for a more transparent taxation system, and this the protests that happened last year should not be the peak of civic action. It should actually be the beginning of a very long, deliberate campaign for tax justice and meaningful inclusion in how this country is run. So yes, I think it was impactful last year, and I know that it, like I mentioned, it was just the beginning, and we need more of that, so that the government can be can be held accountable onto the decisions that they make, and ensure that everything is passed in favor of the common mwananchi. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Alexander, to you.
Well, thank you. In my view, I think the protests last year have borne some meaningful fruits. If you look at the demeanor of the government, if the current finance bill is anything to go by, it tells you that the crafting of this current finance bill was done in a very careful way, by ensuring that we do not have sudden introduction of new tax measures. What is happening now, they're trying to clean up statutes and administrative issues. That notwithstanding, we have the few the bad things that we have mentioned. A good document can always be made better. But in my view, going forward, we now need to make use of the same energies that we did last year to focus on expenditure. Because we have been saying, and I would still repeat it here, what we have in this country is not a revenue problem, it's an expenditure problem. And now we need to focus all our guns towards expenditure. And we need to ensure that now the Kenyan people understand that the reason why we were having these punitive tax measures that have been coming through last year's finance bill and the 2023 finance bill is to try and satisfy expenditure costs that are emanating from extravagances of government. So this time round and going forward, we need to shift our focus and focus on expenditure, because now looking at the current budget, there are some items that are quite extravagant, and we need to focus some more energies into that. And this we should now start from now going forward, and we should also not let the ball down. The fact that this year's finance bill is softer, as one of the panelists had indicated, does not mean that next year we are not likely to have a harsh finance bill. So we should not lay our guard down, but we should, with the same energies that we have focused on the finance bill, we should now focus on the appropriation bill, that is the expenditure side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alexander. And now to wrap up the panelists' point of view, Cornelius, if you may.
Yeah, I concur with my fellow panelists that at least for once, government has appreciated that somebody is listening and somebody is really looking at the scheme of things. Because I think for a very long time, there's been this assumption that people will not understand the technicalities of the finance bill, the appropriation bill, and stuff like that. But at least last year's experience was a lesson to government that people have the capability, if given time and space, to scrutinize some of these documents. And I think young people were able to see the schemes an enhancement of taxation on the digital economy, which was really a trigger to the young people, because government was trying to invade spaces that hitherto had not been invaded in terms of opening the tax bracket or the tax base. And I think this time around the approach has been very different. The chest thumping approach that we saw with the parliament last year and castigating young people as idlers who did not understand how this economy runs. I think this time around I've been very cautious, and I still believe that some of these proposals have been secretly been put in spaces that we are yet to see, because most of them probably goes to the private sector, and if private sector is feels the weight of this taxation or tax regime, then this is likely to have a negative impact on the general public in terms of increased cost of services or goods. But I must say that it was a big lesson, and I think the approach by which Parliament now has treated this current exercise tells you that they are very much cautious, and they know that Kenyans are not fools. We understand what we are doing, only that sometimes they rush these things, and the volumes of the document that we have to peruse over a very short period of time has been a big disadvantage to our ability to scrutinize properly and tease out some of the negative proposals in some of these policy documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much to my panelists. I'd like to read just a few comments from our listeners. One is from the question that we had posed before, that is the 2025 finance bill fairer than the 24 finance bill? And we've had one from at Itzmanim. He has said, in his own opinion, that he doesn't think the person who hunted me or failure youth can ever be fair. Objectively, the process has been the same, with a makeup stroke actor touch here and there, as it has not stopped them from bringing draconian provision like CARES and KICA amendment that would hang our privacy. Still on his comments, he's able to share that we've been able to attack the how finance bill. Now it's time for the what. So basically, we need to address the so what question and the appropriation of expenditure. The question is, how do we do that, having witnessed the divergency and disunity amongst us? And I think this question will best be answered by Alexander. I'm sorry to throw you under the bus. And the question is, just for me to repeat to you, is how we've been able to attack the how finance bill. Now it's time for the what, the appropriation or expenditure. The question is, how do we do that, having witnessed the divergency and disunity amongst us?
Sorry, I didn't get the question very well.
Okay, let me just repeat it for you. The question is, we've been able to attack the how the finance bill. Now it is time for the what, the appropriation and expenditure. You had mentioned that the problem that we have is not a revenue problem, but an expenditure problem. So now that we know that, how can we, how do we do that, having witnessed the divergency and disunity amongst us? This, Itzmalim, feels like we are not unified.
Okay. Everything starts from somewhere. Let me start responding that way in a philosophical way. Everything starts from somewhere, even what we saw with the finance bill last year and actually 2023. From 2023, that is when Kenyans started talking about the finance bill. And now coming into last year, everybody knew there was something called finance bill. And people were shocked after the finance bill was rejected, and then they heard there was another animal called appropriations bill. So we are already starting this journey, and we need to now focus more on the appropriations bill. If you look at even our own, in this space, we focus more on making submissions on the finance bill as compared to making submissions to the Budget and Appropriations Committee. I think in the next year, in my view, we should have more submissions, both written and oral, going to the Budget and Appropriations Committee compared to what is happening right now. Secondly, as we now start implementing the budget come 1st of July, we should focus more on agitating for a more participatory supplementary budget process. If it means that we go through public interest litigation to get judicial opinion on why we normally go through this process of preparing the initial budget through a 10-month process, and then the supplementary budget doesn't go through any public participation. That is the route that we need to take, because in my view and in my experience, most of the budget amendments, expenditure amendments, increases here and there happens more in the supplementary budget process. So we should prepare ourselves and lay more focus on ensuring that we participate more as Kenyans in the supplementary budget process, and ensuring that we follow the expenditure of the expenditures after the appropriation has happened. This budget will be signed into law sometimes in June, and starting July 1, implementation will start. So we need also to interact more with even the quarterly economic and budget review reports that are produced every quarter by the National Treasury. We also need to interact more with the quarterly budget implementation reports produced by the Office of the Control of Budget, so that we put more effort on the expenditure side. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, I'd like to open the floor for the next at least 20 minutes to our listeners. If you have a question to our panelists, you can just request to speak, and then we shall let you in. There's a comment by Thomas. He's saying the finance bill is full of, okay, I can't read that out loud, but his sentiments are the finance bill should be scrapped, the 2025 one, it should be scrapped. I don't know if there's anyone who's requested to speak. Or if you're not able,
maybe before you open it up,
yeah.
I just want to add, weigh in on the issue of the expenditure side. You might ask yourself, what is driving this appetite to increase taxation? When you look at our budgets critically, you realize that the bulk of the monies that we are raising is used to service debt. And if we don't focus or turn our eyes on the issue of public debt accountability, then you realize however much we are able to raise through taxation, much of this money will still be going into servicing debts, some of which are odious. And more importantly, on the question of even expenditure, is the whole concept of budgeted corruption. Every other time our budget is growing. I think this time around is the range of 4-point-something trillion. But much of this money actually goes west through schemes that are put in the budget to service corruption ends. So we need to turn our eyes not only on how we are raising revenue, but how this money is being spent. Because if we don't tame the appetite for corruption in this country, then I think we'll be taxed to a level that is will no longer be sustainable. It's better that we are taxed and we are able to see what that tax is doing. To the extent that the bulk of it is being used to pay debts means that we are not getting a corresponding service delivery despite the ever-increasing taxation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cornelius. Diana, do you have some sentiments on the expenditure side?
I think the speakers have addressed it comprehensively. I really have nothing to add.
Perfect, thank you. Now, I don't know if there's someone I've left out behind and they wanted to share their sentiments. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone from my end. Is there? Okay. This conversation, the conversation on the bill is not a one-time conversation. It's not a one-day conversation. And in our various circles of engagement and friendships and work environment, what we can do as citizens is how do we move past this? How do we not avoid the same scenario that happened last year? And as we have had today, this bill raises some serious questions, not just about tax, but about privacy, fairness, and power. But the good news is we are not powerless. This is something that we have known, that the power belongs to the people. And Article 1 of the Constitution gives us that right and mandate to make sure that the people that we put in power, we hold them into accountable. So what can we do as citizens in regards to this bill that is being shared? Number one is to speak up publicly. You tag MPs, different MPs in different regions that we are coming from on our social media with our concerns. Ask them the hard questions using the hashtag that I had presented before. That is the hashtag Finance Bill 2025 Decoded, especially on issues like the real-time access to personal data without court orders, deletion of protections for businesses from forced carrier integration. Let them know we are watching and we demand answers. I think this already has been the case, that we tell them that we are watching whatever they're doing and we are demanding answers. The second part would be to show up in civic spaces, join the town halls, these such spaces that we host with our different organizations, the community forums, because I know there are many of them that are trying to decode this finance bill. Just for the common Wananchi to understand, the ones who do not have access to internet, they're not able to access Twitter. How can we break it down? The same way we were able to do last year, breaking down the finance bill to our languages, languages, let's say like Kisi, Kikuyu, Luo, how we were able to decode that and then to ensure that anyone who's from the marginalized is able to understand why we are talking about this bill. And so solidarity multiplies power. The same way we did with 24, I think we can be able to do it again for 2025. And the same part is to be a civic educator, just mentioning on the how we were able to translate the Finance Bill 24 in our different languages. We can also do the same way in this. We can share the information on our WhatsApp groups, our social media. Confusion protects power. Clarity, it empowers people. The way we shifted the narrative in 24 is the same way we'll shift this narrative. And with time, they will understand that we hold the power and not them. So we cannot afford to sit this one out. What's at stake isn't just a tax law. It is how power is exercised over our lives and our pockets. Let's make this the moment we turn awareness into action. And I'd like to close off with a quote that was given to us by TI. If you're not at the table, you are probably on the menu. Let us decode, discuss, and defend our future. Ladies and gentlemen, that has been my time for today. And thank you very much for listening in and having the conversations. The conversation will continue online until we make sure that our issues are raised. So for tonight, from my end and my co-host and the panelists that we've had, that is Diana Wanzia from TI Kenya, Cornelius Odwar from KHRC, and Alexander Rithi from TISA. It is good night from us and have a lovely evening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Good night.